So this is Steve Stevens. He's the person who introduced me to electric cars. I get his emails from him, and about 8 years ago, he had an email about how he bought an electric car, the Chevy Volt, and I read it and it said that makes a lot of sense to me. I was driving a Lexus hybrid at the time, and so I test drove one. I had to go all the way up to Fort Morgan to find one to test drive. And an auto broker took me up there, and we test drove it up there, and I said, yeah, I'm going to buy it. And I had to go to Emic in Aurora to buy. We ordered one that was on a train on its way to Colorado, and as soon as it arrived, I went to Emic, not Emic, another one out in Aurora, and bought it there. So it was hard to find them back then. And but he introduced me to the Volt. He sold me on the Volt. The Volt sold me on the Tesla, and here we are. So Steve Stevens, take it away.
Hi, and the second speaker, are you
I'm going to be the second speaker.
Okay, the third speaker will do a lot on the old history, but just, I'm going to try to give perspectives. And they can look a lot of different ways. They can be pure electric, or they can be hybrid. To be a plug-in, these are actually not a plug-in. The interesting thing about these, you got to leave them out in the sun to dry for them to run. So it's not a plug-in.
It's not a family car.
But it's a pure electric. It doesn't use any fossil fuels. Okay, go ahead. And I want to do the general transportation, thinking out of the box. If you want to get from here to there, there's lots of ways you can do it. Whoops. You can come off a Lookout Mountain and hope that the winds, that you can every now and then catch a thermal and get some range and catch another thermal. You can do that. You can crawl. That was the first way you got from here to there, most of you. You can go on a ship. If it gets there, there's a Titanic. It didn't get there. So you got to worry about a little bit of range and reliability and robustness. And or you can try to go on a fast high G takeoff. Tarzan did that. The Wright brothers, this is right before they put a motor on their kites and they're testing. But there's, and you can ride these kind of bikes and they work really well. I've done 39,000 miles on them. Or you can be behind draft animals in a carriage or just ride a horse outright. There's lots of ways that you can get from here to there. Okay, so the required mindset for given, and I'm a scientist, I believe in science, for today's climate and energy realities are, you need a mindset to do environmentally better than we've been doing because the storms are getting worse. And so walk, bike, swim, bus, rail, carpool, taxi, multi-mode. Consider your real trip's needs and objectives, then select the right transportation for it. And plan trips for maybe multi-mode. You start out walking to the bus station or the bus stop and then bus. So putting things together. So energy efficiency and the efficiency and the carbon content of the energy you use, whether it's from the sun or whether it's from fossil fuels. And then combine many things in a trip. Next. I'm just showing for fun. This is multi-mode. I just kind of like the contrast of an 1887 bike on the back of a 1984 Corvette, because you could go to.
That's a Corvette?
So yeah, that's an 84.
Oh, okay.
And actually, the bike cost more than the car.
Yeah.
Because used Corvettes, 10 years old are cheap, 20 years old are expensive. I went through 7 of those. That's a different story. And every one I sold for more than I paid for the car, the gas, the insurance, and the repairs. So they were all free transportation. But next. Okay. Available alternatives is what you need to understand for your transportation, and an understanding of how much energy usage per passenger mile. So how much energy or how many miles per unit of energy? You know miles per gallon, right? Well, there's miles per kilowatt hour, and so for electric. But they can all be turned into a phrase, miles per passenger miles per energy gallon equivalent. So electric cars have a passenger miles per gallon equivalent, or on the label they just have a miles per gallon equivalent. The more people you put in, the more passenger miles you get out of a mile. And then back up. And then the energy source, whether it's carbon emission or emission free, next. Now this lets you know some numbers with a wide spectrum of, so if you walk, if you're a normal average weight person walking efficiently, you get equivalent of 360 passenger miles per gallon equivalent. So the food that you ate gives you so much BTUs of energy that you're using to go. And you get, now on a bike, not a racing bike, but a normal go to town bike, 732. It's twice as efficient on a bike for an average bike, not a super hot bike. A velomobile, which is this, 4,700 passenger miles per gallon equivalent. A motor assist bike, you use either the electricity for electric motor or a little gas motor, you get 200. Now a city bus, if it's full, you're getting 330 passenger miles per gallon equivalent. But if it's only 9 passengers, it's 54. So people say take the bus and it's more efficient. But it's only more efficient if the bus is being utilized. It's not if the bus is empty. Airline, 747, 91 passenger miles if it's full. The old Concorde supersonic was 14. Just, it's interesting to see these ranges. By rail, in Amtrak going across the country, 468 passenger miles if the Amtrak is full. The Queen Elizabeth II, 1,319 passenger miles. Now, if you got this hot Bugatti, you're getting 10 miles. So, you know, that's not very efficient. Then a Tesla Model X, if you have 5 passengers, you get between 450 and 525, depending on how heavy a foot you have. And Tesla Model X, one person, you get 90 to 105. So really, it's kind of interesting. Stay on that just a second. I want to compare that last number. So 90 to 450 or 105 to 525, you're better than buses in many circumstances for passenger miles per gallon equivalent, which is your measure. Now, this is talking about the efficiency, but it's not talking about what energy did you use? What was the quality of the energy? Was it a polluting energy or a non-polluting energy? If you're doing it like Jim is and like I am and many people off of solar panels on your Tesla, it's clean. So you have both the energy of your source being clean and you have a good efficiency. Next. So in evaluating electric cars versus internal combustion engines, will it get you there? I.e., like the Titanic didn't get there. Can you get enough charges to get you there? Can you find, will it get you back? Lifetime vehicle expected mileage. How long will the car last? Because in a car, there's the embodied energy of making it. There's energy that goes in to getting the steel. There's energy that goes into making the aluminum. There's energy that goes into all the parts of the car. So then how far do you amortize that? You know, then the lifetime maintenance and resilience. Does it need all kinds of oil changes? Does it need, I mean, most cars are going to need tires. Does it need buffers? Does it need valve jobs? Does it need brakes? And you'd think, okay, tires are about the same for internal combustion or not. Brakes are going to be different. Internal combustion are going to wear out brakes far faster than electric, because electric regenerate when you slow down. It goes back into the battery. And that's a very satisfying thing. That's how you get large numbers of miles. But it also means that your wear is not much. Then ease of access to fueling, safety of passengers, safety of non-passengers, and carbon footprint of usage. These are things to consider. Next.
Okay.
So I have gotten around to this, but let's do another one. And by the way, It's also an RV if you want. You can camp, 2 people sleep in there. It's a 6-foot 6-inch bed. Next.
With heating and cooling.
With heating and cooling, running all night exactly as you set it.
Yeah.
It doesn't turn itself off if you tell it not to turn itself off. And so how did I get to that? Well, I had many, many bicycles, and then many, many used cheap $200, $500, Ford Falcon and Chevy Vega and AMC little funny things.
Gremlin.
Gremlin, that's it.
Yeah.
So I went through, then I got it used for $200 to $500 to $700. And then I had, when I figured out that you could buy a Corvette that's 10 years old, ride in style and sell it when it was 20 years old, and that you got more money than everything you'd spent for it, its licensing, its insurance, and its gas and its maintenance. Then I went through many used Corvettes. And then I had a 93 Geo Metro that was actually better than the Prius. It gave me 55 miles per gallon, 3-cylinder. It didn't go up I-70 very fast. And a 2007 Prius. Then in 2007, I learned of Tesla. Well, I learned it in 6. And at the very beginning of 2007, I got the TESLA license plate.
Okay. I'm
And
just going to show that again.
yeah, so now I didn't have the Tesla yet, but I got the parking lot,
It was on
or the license plate. Well, it was on the Geo Metro, and then it was on a van. That was my whole thing's van. Okay, and then I modified the because I wanted to be running off solar panels on the roof. I got a conversion from A123 high motion of the Prius to have an extra 5 kilowatt hour plug-in. And that made it for 35 miles, that instead of Prius 50 miles per gallon, I was doing 100 miles per gallon. And then it dropped back down until I plugged it in again. And then, so I started plugging in 2000. Then in 2011, I got the Volt, loved it. People do. And then 2016, I got a used Model S. And 2017, got the new, which is my last car. I'm gonna die with that car unless it gets crashed, because it's gonna last. Because it's not gonna rust out, because it's aluminum. Next, yeah. So think out of the box, or just buy a Tesla Model X or a Model 3, because you can charge them many places. And so 125 years of evolution went from that.
This was electric.
That was electric, the Flocken Elektrowagen.
Yeah. Yep. They actually predate the gas engine cars, right?
I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure if they predate.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Is that it? Yep.
So that's it.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the subtitle says it all. And remember, I wrote this a few years ago. Electric drivetrains simply make more sense and are now more practical and affordable for cars and trucks. People think they're not affordable, but they really are. Next. So Volkswagen said it back in 2007. This was from their newsletter, from their owner magazine, VW Driver. They said back in 2007, they said, actually, Volkswagen expects that all cars eventually will be electric. That's the current 2007 point of view anyway. For starters, however, clean diesel is the next best alternative because it's simply the best fuel available. So what didn't, when they had that scandal with clean diesel, by which time Tesla was already proving electric cars, I knew they're not going to clean up their act. They're just going to abandon diesel and go to electric. And sure enough, Volkswagen is now saying that they're going to, within the next couple of years, have 22 different electric vehicles over their 12 different brands. You may not know this, but they own Bentley and Porsche and Audi and several.
Fiat.
Yeah, 12 brands. They're going to have 22 electric cars shortly. That's what they're gearing up for. Next. So what's the carbon footprint of gas-powered cars? When I first got my Volt, I said to myself, I don't want to go from burning gasoline to burning coal, because I was thinking electricity is made by coal. It's about 60% coal is used for Xcel Energy. But next. But it turns out that even if it was 100% coal generated, the carbon footprint of an electric car using that coal-generated electricity is smaller than for gasoline. And the reason is this. Less than 20% of the power in gasoline goes to propel the vehicles. Next. electric cars are 90% efficient. 90% of the energy used goes to powering the wheels because aren't the parasitic losses. Next. This is from fueleconomy.gov, which is a federal website. They calculate that 71 to 75% of the energy in gasoline goes to losses associated with heat, combustion, pumping, friction. The drivetrain loss is 4 to 5%. Only 14 to 20% of the energy is going to moving the car. Next. Slowing down and going downhill, it gets worse because going downhill, you're burning gasoline too. Only electric vehicles allow you to recapture the energy used to go uphill when you're going downhill, or to slow down after speeding up. Next. I did this test where I reset the trip odometer in my Tesla, and the trip odometer, when I was at the Genesee exit of I-70, the trip odometer on a Tesla measures kilowatt hours used as well as miles traveled. And so I reset it to 0 at the exit at I-70 to see how much energy I would actually gain going from Genesee to here, to this office. And when I got to the office, it said minus 1.5 kilowatt hours had been used. In other words, 1.5 kilowatt hours had been put back into the battery coming from Genesee to here. And that's enough to go 5 miles after I'm down here. So compare that to, say, my wife was driving a Lexus at the time. It would have probably gotten about 40 miles per gallon going downhill, which means that she would have burned a quart of gas. And then it would take another quart of gas at 20 miles per gallon to go the 5 miles that I get for free from the energy I generated going downhill. Next. Electricity is the only energy, moreover, that you and I can create. We're creating it here with our solar panels. There's no other source of energy, hydrogen or whatever, gasoline, coal, that you can generate at your house. Next. So today's sustainability model is put enough solar panels on your house to power your house and your car. Next. But a lot of people wonder how powerful can electric cars be. Well, here's a powerful one. As you were saying earlier, diesel locomotives, they burn diesel to create the electricity because there are no lines overhead to get the power from. This is really just like your streetcar, except that it doesn't have wires. It's got to get the electricity from generating it. So next slide. It has a diesel engine and 12 wheels. And the diesel engine is running a generator to send electricity to 6 wheels on each side. There's a separate motor for each wheel. That's an electric vehicle. Next. Do you like performance? Well, everybody knows that Teslas are like famous for their performance. EV's instant torque has become legendary.
And volts are very good on
Oh, yeah.
and all of the electric cars.
You know, and one of the interesting things about electric motors is that the horsepower is related to how much energy you allow the motor to receive. So there's a sports setting in the volt where you put it on sports setting and it's almost twice as peppy as it is when it's not on sports setting. All it's doing is it's releasing more electricity to the motor. And when Tesla introduced ludicrous mode, and in the Model S, I think it was like 3 point something seconds to get from 0 to 60. And then somebody else got something better than that. So Tesla just did a software release over the air to all their cars. And now it was 2.8 seconds, 0 to 60, because they simply changed the amount of electricity that was allowed to go from the battery to the motor. Next. And EVs aren't new. This is a 1950 Detroit Electric. And David McNeil's here now. He's our historian. He's going to talk about the history. He's going to basically tell you that back then, electric cars outsold gas-powered cars. The reason? You had to crank an electric car. Gas car, I mean. You had to crank it. And you could break your arm. My parents had a tractor that had to be cranked back in the 1960s, and when I was on the farm. And I learned how to crank that car, and you had to be careful because you could break your arm if it kicked back.
It killed people on occasion.
Yeah, could kill people? Oh, that's interesting. Well, anyway, you can imagine the women the women in particular loved electric cars because they could just get in it, turn a switch, and drive off. And what killed the electric car in 1915? An electric motor killed the electric car, and that electric motor we know today as the starter. Once you could get in a Model T and press a button to start it, then the advantages of the gas engine car were greater than of an electric car, because keep in mind, all we had back then was lead acid batteries, which were heavy, had a lifespan that was shorter, and took a while to charge, and they just were not as practical as a 20-gallon gas tank that you could fill quickly. So what's changed now, next, is that the batteries have changed. That's all that's new. The technology of course, we have computers driving these electric cars now, but and managing the power and so forth. But the fact is that it's only the batteries that are new. Electric car is an old technology. Next, let's talk affordability. Electric cars are already affordable because of federal and state tax credits. This has been reduced for Tesla and for GM. It's been cut in half to $3,750 because they sold 200,000 cars each. But it's still in effect for the Nissan Leaf and for all those other electric cars that VW is going to introduce, and that BMW already has, and is going to be creating more. They get more affordable every day too. Next.
You have for Colorado, you didn't talk about.
Oh, Colorado, $5,000 rebate at purchase. Well, it's only at purchase with some dealers. Tesla doesn't take it off the purchase price. Nissan will, if you use Nissan leasing, but at any rate, it's a tax rebate that you get on your tax return. My taxes this year are $12,500 less because I bought my Model X in the year 2018. So these are some prices of cars. They may be a little out of date, but they're basically the same. And these are just what was available last year when I updated this slide. Now, let's look, for example, at the Chevy Volt. It's about 35, the 2018 Chevy Volt was about 35,000 when they stopped production last month. That's about the cost of a Camry, and it's about the same size as a Camry. And it has this, I had a Camry, so I compare it to my Camry. But take $12,500 off that. I pay, you could buy a new Chevy Volt for in the low 20s, $20,000, and not have any gas costs unless you drive more than 40 miles in a day between charges. Now, Debbie here, one of our agents, I didn't introduce the agents who are present, so sorry about that, but Debbie here bought a used Chevy Volt for about $12,000. Mm-hmm. The neat thing about buying a used electric car is that they're as good as new. I mean, for $12,000, she bought a car that costs $35,000, $40,000 upgraded, new, and it performs like new. And you told me that you went from...
I was paying $400 a month in gas.
In gas, and now?
And now, on a bad month, really bad month is 50. Normally it's 10, under 20.
Yeah, yeah.
You guys do a lot of driving?
Yeah, she gets free electricity here. And you said, you told me when you first bought it that your savings in gas pays for your lease, for your
I paid for my car payment.
your car payment.
Yeah, so I didn't have a car payment. My other car was paid off. But then, I had a $200 car payment, but I was still saving $200 a month because I wasn't paying for gas.
Yeah, it's great.
And it's really fun too because it just rolls downhill like a marble. It's really fun.
Okay, next. These tax credits are for early adopters, so B1. Next. EVs cost less to operate. This is what people aren't factoring in. You think, well, I'll buy an electric car when it's the same price as a gas-powered car. But next slide. The fuel cost per mile is less. Back, the left arrow. 4 cents a mile. Let's say you're paying for your electricity, which I don't. I get it free. But if you're paying for the electricity, a kilowatt hour is about 12 cents. You get at least three miles per kilowatt hour, and as much as 4. So that's like 3 or 4 cents per mile. for the electricity. Gasoline cars, let's say that it's $3 a gallon and you get 30 miles to the gallon, it's 10 cents just for the gasoline. Or $2 a gallon, 20 miles. It's basically the cost for gasoline in cars goes from 10 to 30 cents. But then, next slide, you got to factor in the maintenance. There's nothing to maintain on an electric car. And on gasoline cars I figure you have to provide, if you're going to keep the car for 100 or 200,000 miles, you really should have like a sinking fund of about 10 cents a mile for future repairs of things that don't even exist on an electric car, such as a transmission. Next. Tesla cars, this is in 2014 when there was only a rear-wheel drive Tesla. It said that Tesla cars have 18 moving parts compared to 2,000 in an internal combustion engine car. Next. Most common automotive repairs, brake work. You'd hardly use the brakes in a Tesla because when you let off on the accelerator, it slows down pretty quickly. It's called one-pedal driving. You really only use the brakes in a Tesla to complete a stop or for panic stops. Oil changes, of course not. Coolant system, no. Tires, yes. Ignition system, no. Electrical system, no. Fuel system, no. Transmission, no. Exhaust system, no. Air conditioning systems. You know, the air conditioner is run by a pump driven by your fan belt. There's no fan belt in an electric car. It's run by an electric motor, which has a much better lifespan than a pulley-driven compressor. Next. Okay, you can skip this. Now let's hit the play button, which is down. Let's see here. Down, isn't there a play? I think this is a video. This is an Amco commercial.
That means there are 800 things that could go wrong. When something does go wrong, there's only one place to go. Amco. Double A.
I love it. There are 850 things that can go wrong because in a transmission, which doesn't exist in electric cars. So next. So it costs less to build an electric car. Der Spiegel said that half the cost of building a conventional car is the drivetrain. For a battery electric car, replace those costs with battery electric motors and little else, and the battery cost is going down all the time. It's down to about $100 per kilowatt hour now. Next. And this is a 350 horsepower Tesla motor with a cutaway to show the copper windings inside. It can be changed in 15 minutes. Try changing a V8 engine.
Is that one of those on every wheel or just the...
No, there's one between the front wheels and between the back wheels. And back then it was a rear wheel drive only, so there was one motor in the back between the two rear wheels. Next. And here's how you plug it in. A 240 volt outlet is what you really want in your garage. This is the head, the plug to replace the 110 volt head that's on that one there. And this is the cord I have in the parking lot here. I just installed an outlet. You don't need a charging station. And that'll charge at 40 amps. If you have a 40 amp circuit, that'll charge about 30 miles per hour being plugged in. So in 5 hours, 150 miles. Basically, you need to think of an electric car like an iPhone or a cell phone. You plug it in when you go to bed, it's fully charged in the morning. And if fully charged means you have 200 miles of range, you don't need to charge during the day. Next. And in a Tesla, the battery and motor come with an 8-year unlimited mileage warranty on the Model S and Model X. I think they've changed that on the Model 3. But the fact is that the lithium-ion batteries, which someday in the next decade will be obsolete themselves as we get into solid-state batteries, which don't use chemicals, they don't degrade. They don't die, they just degrade. The reason your lead-acid battery dies abruptly in a car is because the lead is used up. It actually consumes the lead in the process of charging and discharging, and you're only left with the electrolyte but no lead. And whereas in lithium-ion battery, the lithium is not consumed. It degrades to the extent that tentacles, or like stalagmites and stalactites, I'm told, start building up on the surface of the lithium, but it doesn't consume the lithium, and so it becomes a little less efficient. It's been estimated about 1% per year, but my 7-year-old Chevy Volt has the same range it had when I bought it, so I don't see any degradation. myself. Next.
Yeah, and I'll just throw in, there are Teslas with 400,000 miles now, and they've lost 2 miles of range. If they were
Yeah.
260 or
Yeah.
280 miles, they've lost 2 miles after 400,000.
And one reason is that Tesla, unlike Nissan, had a battery management system from the very beginning, which involved a cooling system. There is coolant in a Tesla, and there is a coolant pump that drives the coolant through the battery complex assembly to keep the battery from getting too hot and to keep it from getting too cold. And the Nissans didn't have that. And so down in Arizona in particular, the batteries were dying because it got really hot down there in Arizona and in the summertime, and they weren't cooling their batteries, and it was a bad thing. But Tesla batteries, I haven't heard of anyone having a Tesla battery replaced, ever.
And a lot of them with 350 and 400,000.
Yeah, next. Supercharger network, I'm going to be driving to Massachusetts for my 50th reunion next in June, and I can either take Interstate 70 or Interstate 80. Just stopping for 15 to 40 minutes at each supercharger every couple hundred miles, and have a meal, pee, and do the other things, check my email, of course, and write emails. So, and they're even in Canada. I'm going to be coming back through Quebec after I leave Massachusetts. Next. Safety is really important, and Tesla has a really great safety record. And one of the things that's particularly safe at is the side impact, because the battery, which is about 5 inches thick, goes from the front axle to the back axle, or from the front wheel well to the rear wheel well, and it's in a cage. And when in the side impact test, there was only a 6-inch intrusion from the side from being T-boned, but in other cars it was typically 18 inches. So that's because of the rigidity which having that battery pack underneath the car provides. And the story goes that when they tried to crush this car, it broke the machine that was used for crushing it. Which is amazing, since it's an aluminum frame and aluminum sheet metal. Only 3% of the metal in this car is steel. Next.
Talk about the front for safety.
Oh, well, yeah, you have no engine up there. Well, you have a motor, you saw the motor earlier. But this is a great absorber of energy without pushing an engine into the firewall and into your compartment. So, yeah, it can absorb much more energy in the front.
And they all have airbags, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The same side airbags, front airbags, you name it. All the same. Next. Would you rather be in the Mercedes or in the Tesla? The Mercedes has a lot of gasoline in it, which is flammable, and completely engulfed in flames, whereas this was a head-on collision in Europe, whereas the Tesla just has front-end damage. Next. No carbon monoxide. It's a great car in the winter. You don't need to puff, and you can, and you don't even really need to warm it up, although they have a setting you can use. If the car knows you're leaving at 8 a.m. every day, it'll warm it up at 7:45. But it's just all run off the battery. And the heating in the winter, I've calculated, consumes about 5 miles of range per hour of keeping the cabin hot. So it's a great car in the winter for emergencies, because if you break down or if you go into a ditch or something, you will have heat for as long as you need it. Even if the car is upside down, because it doesn't matter. It's just a battery generating heat. So next. So don't buy a gas-powered car if you're into a market for a new car, because the new gas-powered cars last a long time. They are really good. Lexuses, for example, are particularly good. I suppose BMW is okay, but 5, 10 years from now, you'll say, oh my God, I should have bought one, and now it'll be hard to sell it because nobody will want your used gas-powered car 5 or 10 years from now. They'll all want electric. And by the way, the best deal of all is to buy a used electric car, because like with Debbie, the industry thinks they should depreciate. But think about this. My 2012 Chevy Volt, it was fully loaded. It's cost me $42,000. Has 82,000 miles on it. It's got a gas motor that probably has 7,000 miles on it. And that gas motor never had a load because it's not connected to the wheels. It was just generating electricity, constant speed, velocity motor. It's like a gas generator that you'd have at your home. It's not under load. It's not trying to move the wheels. So 7,000 miles on that gas motor. That car, you could buy, the Kelley Blue Book value of that car, which I paid $40,000 for, is under $10,000. And I assure you, it drives like new. It's just as powerful, has just as much range. The motor is practically new because it's only got 7,000 miles on it. But Kelley Blue Book says, oh, 82,000 miles, 2012, $10,000 at most. Buy a used electric car. And if you buy a used Tesla that was built before 2017, you'll have transferable free supercharging for life, which is transferable when you sell it to the next buyer. And so when I drive my Tesla to Massachusetts and back through Canada, the only cost of traveling will be the wear on the tires, because there's no cost of electricity and there's no maintenance. I might need to get some windshield solvent.
Yeah.
That's about all you buy for it when you have a Tesla, is the windshield solvent. Next slide. So, oh, this is what I just said, yeah. These were prices I got back. These were prices I guess I got from just checking in 2018. That was a practically new Chevy Bolt. Yeah. Next. Other countries are much further along. Europe is way ahead of us in everything, it seems like. They had these heat pump mini splits long before we are starting now to introduce them, because our energy is so cheap. People don't really think about the fact that these are so much cheaper. But next slide. Spain. The next few slides are from Spain. City bus, over-the-road bus, next. School buses. Delivery trucks. Box trucks, semis. This was a semi that was commissioned by BMW for Munich, Germany. This one has only 60 miles of range, but it's only used to go between the 6 factories in Munich, shuttling parts from one BMW to another. There was the Nikola. It's funny, you know, I've got Tesla and you've got Nikola, both of them named after Nikola Tesla. Nikola is racing Tesla to produce the first electric semi, except this one isn't pure electric. This one is a hydrogen fuel cell with a battery, 320 kilowatt hour battery and hydrogen fuel cell to generate electricity for range extending. But, and they're just now going into production, I think. I think I read that today. Next. This is a minivan. Wouldn't it be nice if we had minivans? This is for like 4 or 5 years, this electric minivan has been available in Spain. And this is a pickup, sort of a pickup truck. Next. Now we do have motorcycles in electric motorcycles made in California. Zero is the biggest producer of them, but Harley Davidson has gone into production on their electric motorcycle, and it's $30,000.
Yeah. You can get a car for it.
Yeah. Next. Electric bikes. I have an electric bike. This Saturday, when we have our electric vehicle roundup in the parking lot, we're going to have a vendor is going to be here with electric bicycles that you can test ride. I have an electric bike. I love it. And people who ride electric bikes get more exercise than people who have regular bikes because they ride them more. And you can also use them for commuting because you're not going to need a shower when you get to your destination. It's still pedal assist. It's not like an electric scooter. You pedal, but the motor assists. It's called pedal assist. Great. And
you can select how much assistance.
Yeah, you can assess. Yeah, that's true. You can determine how much assistance you want. Next. This was in the news recently because the Denver Police Department secured this Tesla. It's an old Tesla. It's like a 2013 rear-wheel drive Tesla. They obtained it through confiscation from a drug bust. The feds gave it to them. Next. Now, taxi cabs, great for taxi cabs. And this is, again, a few years old, but when I did this slide, there were already 167 Tesla Model S taxi cabs in service at the Amsterdam airport and Oslo, Norway. Okay, so this is my last slide. Question is, what are you waiting for? I've shown you that they're powerful and safe, cheap to operate, even cheaper to maintain. The drivetrain, warranted for up to 8 years, can be fueled for free at home or work and on long trips. Will have great resale value ultimately, but not right now. Take advantage of that low resale value and get yourself a used one.
And I have a backyard with about 13 electrics. Some of them are e-bikes, some of them are scooters. One of them is a motorcycle I converted in 1976. I've been involved with electric cars since 1975. The Denver Electric Vehicle Council, which I've been a member of the whole time, was founded in 1974. So electrics are not new. As a matter of fact, the Denver Electric Vehicle Council was started right up here on Lookout Mountain. There was a guy up there, his name was Darwin Dykes. Somebody came in from Florida, looked him up because he had a company called Battery Power Unit, and they got together and kind of conflabbed and so forth. And so Darwin and George Gliss, who was a professor at CU in Boulder, they got together and started the Denver Electric Vehicle Council. And there were quite a few members that came in. Our communications back then was strictly a newsletter that got mailed through the snail mail. And that was it, because there was no computers, no internet. There wasn't even a 4-function calculator yet, till about 1978. So things have really changed in the last 40 years. And things have really changed in the last 7 years of that 40. And things are really going to change in the next 3 years, probably double what's happened in the last 7 years. But electric cars started back in 1839, 180 years ago, an electric car. And you've all heard of the Porsche. Ferdinand Porsche designed the Porsche cars. His first car that he designed was an electric car, and they didn't find that until just a few years ago. And so he was entering in different, scientific things over in Europe and so forth, and it was really something. And a lot of activity just before the turn of the century. I mean, electric cars were starting to come about, and there was steam and there was electric. No internal combustion engine cars yet. So at this turn of the century, there was even activity here in Colorado. Who has heard of the Fritchley Electric? Aha. Fritchley was a chemist who built batteries, and down here it's called the Fillmore something or other, used to be a roller skate rink or something in Denver. That was the building that he had, that they manufactured Fritchley electric cars in. And
What year was that?
what's that?
What year?
I believe that was in 1907. And but there was other activity. How many in here know who Mamie Dowd is? Aha. She was the wife of President Dwight Eisenhower. Well, her family lived here in Denver. They had a 1914 Detroit Electric, similar to the one that you saw up here on the slide that was red. And there's even a history book in the Penrose Library down in Colorado Springs that shows a picture of President Eisenhower sitting in that 1914 Detroit Electric with his arm hanging out the window.
Mrs. Penrose had an electric car.
There was a lot of people in Colorado Springs had electric cars, and they kept them in what's called the Strang Garage, which is right down next to the Antlers Hotel in downtown Colorado Springs. The president of the First National Bank in Colorado Springs had an electric car, and a lot of them lived on Wood Avenue. But one I just found out here just recently, that one of the kids of Strang, maybe his grandkid, whatever it was, his job was to go around and put a flower in the vase in the electric cars. And a lot of the electric cars were steered with a tiller. You actually sat in the back seat rather than sitting in the front seat. And there were two tillers. One was the speed control and the other one you steered the car with. So things were really super interesting back then. And the founder of Colorado Springs was General William Jackson Palmer. And he had a horseback riding accident in 1906. And it paralyzed him from the neck down. But he was an outsider. He was a horseman. He wanted to be outside. Somebody suggested, you should get one of these new electric cars. They're quiet, and they don't have the vibration of the single or two-cylinder gas cars. So he ordered up one from Pope Waverly, and it was special built. With, instead of having a back seat, they put in an easy chair. And he ordered that in, probably got it in about March of 1907. And then later on that year was when Fritchley came out. But if anybody is really interested in history of electric cars, I have a little thing that I made up. This is General Palmer's electric car. And then over here we go back a page and we'll get to a couple of different cars that Fritchley put out. I guess it's on the next page maybe.
Didn't Molly Brown have an electric car too?
You know, I don't know if she had one or not. She might have, because they were really popular with the ladies. Henry Ford's wife drove an electric car. These are the two Fritchleys up here on the top page.
Henry Ford was friends with Thomas Edison, and didn't they talk about doing electric cars?
I think they probably did. There's in this little group, I've got a picture of Edison in a Studebaker, an electric car. Studebaker was kind of big with electrics back in those days. This is the 1914 Detroit Electric. It's one of my favorites. And there's in the 20s was when the electric cars started to fade because of the starter that Jim had mentioned. But they did the Detroit Electrics up until about 1932.
And that brand is coming back.
Yeah, and then somebody bought the rights to that, and they're going to build a sports car, and it's called the Detroit Electric. But the activity in electrics kind of died down and went away until about in the mid-60s. Then the activity started up again, and there was a group, Lasky was his name. He started a group called the Electric Auto Association in California, and that started in 1967. And it was 7 years later that the Denver Electric Vehicle Council came about. But they were doing conversions like on Volkswagens. They were taking war surplus starter aircraft generators and an adapter plate and put them right in place of the engine in a Volkswagen, and they were using those for electrics. There was a lot of activity that started in the early 70s, and there was even legislation on the federal level that was taking place, and we even had a bill here in Colorado, and I was active in politics back then, and I went to a guy by the name of Sam Zackham. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of him or not, but have you?
No, I know him.
Cool, cool. Well, I went to him one day and I said, we need some activity with legislation in Colorado for electric cars. He says, well, you write up what you think you ought to have and I'll take it from there. The bill that they wrote up was almost word for word of what I wrote up then. And the big thing we wanted to do was a little recognition. So we had special license plates for electric cars in Colorado, and it was for a 5-year period, and it was in the very early 80s that took place. Lots of excitement in electrics. And electrics have gotten into the racing arena. And last year, Sure, a lot of you have heard of the Pikes Peak International Hill Climb. Last year, Volkswagen came over with a special built race car. It had electric. It had been in the wind tunnel. They've done all kinds of. As a matter of fact, when they showed up, they had 2 cars in case in practice one of them went over the edge. They had a backup. They had backup for everything, and they had all kinds of charging, you know, so that they could. On the Pikes Peak Hill Climb, if you start up and somebody has an accident that went ahead of you, you have to turn around and come back and start over again. When you have an electric, you got to do a quick charge to get the batteries back up so that you can make the trip. But they allowed them to go first, so it was a clear path. And they did that in 7 minutes and 57 seconds, point whatever. An electric car set the overall record for the Pikes Peak International Hill Climb that's been going since about 1906. There was about 4 years during the war that they didn't run races, but it's second only to the Indy 500. This year coming up, we're going to have 3 electric cars, 4 electric motorcycles. So there's activity going on there. The first electric that went up the peak was in 1981. Sears had Globe Union convert a Fiat for them for the Sears Die Hard EV battery, and that was the promotion for it. Took them 32 minutes to get up there. In 1994, Honda employees over in Japan got a group of them together, and they started the conversion of a 1991 Honda Civic. And they came over and got some momentum with some other engineers for American Honda Motor out in California. They brought that to the peak, and that was the first year for an electric class in the Pikes Peak Hill Climb, and there were 4 that entered the race, 4 electrics, and they came out on top with a time of 15 minutes, 44.71 seconds. And they donated that car to the Hill Climb Association. It's been in storage for 25 years. Just pulled it out, dusted it off. I've made a proposal to put it had seal lead acid batteries in it, and I made a proposal to replace those batteries so we can get it running again and have it for events like the National Drive Electric Week that'll be coming up in September and that sort of thing. And so just a lot of interesting things happening with electrics. But if you want to know more about electrics, you can just Google, and you can find anything and everything you want to find. What I try to do is to keep up. I'm also the newsletter editor, and I try to keep up with local things going on in Colorado. There's legislation. There's 3 or 4 bills in there right now. There's also, on the federal level, there's a bill that was just introduced about a week or so ago, and that's to take and reduce the $7,500 tax credit to $7,000 and increase the $200,000 limit to $600,000. So that's currently in legislation. So if you're really a promoter on that, get a hold of our 2 senators and your local representative on the federal level. Tell them you'd like to see that bill go through.
Your GM and your Teslas would again have the $7,500.
Yep. They would be back, and it would be retroactive.